The first thing she said to me was not hello. It was not nice to meet you. It was not even an awkward smile followed by her name. She stood in the doorway of apartment 4B with one trembling hand wrapped around the handle of a faded yellow suitcase, sunlight pouring over her shoulder like the world was trying to make her look less broken, and she said, "You'll probably hate me too." I remember the way those words landed in the quiet hallway, heavy and strange, as if she had not spoken them for the first time, but had been carrying them inside her for years, waiting for someone new to prove them true. Before we begin, if you believe kindness can change a life, if you believe people deserve second chances even when the world has misunderstood them, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ancient Truth. Your support helps stories like this reach the hearts that need them most. My name is Kieran Vale, and at that time, I was 29 years old, living in a small but bright apartment above a bakery on Maple Street. Every morning, the smell of warm bread came through the floorboards, and every afternoon, sunlight filled the living room so strongly that even the dust looked golden. I had been living alone for almost a year after my cousin moved out, and though I told everyone I enjoyed the silence, the truth was that silence had started to feel like a second person in the room. It sat with me at breakfast, followed me after work, and waited beside the couch every evening. So when my landlord called and said he had found someone responsible to take the spare room, I agreed before asking many questions. I imagined an ordinary roommate, someone who paid rent on time, maybe left dishes in the sink, maybe watched loud TV, maybe became a friend. I did not imagine Soraya then. She looked about 26, with dark auburn hair tied loosely behind her neck and eyes that seemed too tired for someone standing in a bright morning hallway. She wore a simple cream cardigan, jeans, and scuffed white sneakers, but there was something careful about the way she stood, as though she expected the floor to disappear beneath her. Behind her was only one suitcase, one canvas bag, and a small cardboard box pressed against the wall. No furniture, no friends helping her move, no cheerful phone calls, no excited energy of a new beginning. Just her, a few belongings, and that sentence that made me feel like I had walked into the middle of a story I did not understand. I told her I did not hate people before breakfast, and for a second, I thought she might smile. Her mouth moved like it wanted to, but the smile never reached the surface. She apologized softly, stepped inside, and looked around the apartment as if she were trying not to touch anything emotionally. I showed her the kitchen, the bathroom, the laundry closet, and the spare bedroom with pale blue walls and a window facing the street. The room was full of sunlight, and when she saw it, her fingers tightened around the suitcase handle. She whispered that it was nice, but she said it like nice things made her nervous. For the first few days, Soraya barely made a sound. She woke early, cleaned dishes that were not hers, wiped counters that were already clean, and always asked before using anything. She never played music. She never left her shoes out. She never sat in the living room unless I invited her twice. It was like living with someone who was trying to take up less space than her own shadow. At first, I thought she was shy. Then I thought maybe she was proud. Then, one afternoon, when I came home from work and found her scrubbing a coffee stain from the kitchen tile with tears running silently down her face, I realized she was terrified. The stain was mine. I had spilled coffee that morning while rushing out, barely noticed it, and forgotten. But Soraya was on her knees, rubbing the tile as if the stain was evidence in a trial. When I told her to stop, she flinched so sharply that my voice caught in my throat. She looked up with wet eyes and said she was sorry, that she should have cleaned it sooner, that she did not want to be a problem. I stood there holding my work bag, confused and ashamed for reasons I could not explain. I told her it was just coffee. She nodded, but her hands kept shaking. After that, I started noticing things. She never answered unknown phone calls, but when her phone buzzed, her face went pale. She kept her bedroom door open during the day but closed it carefully when she slept, placing a chair under the handle even though our apartment was safe. She walked to the grocery store at noon but never after sunset. Since this story takes place mostly in the bright hours of ordinary days, I remember the strange sadness of watching someone fear the world even under full sunlight. Fear looked different on Soraya. It did not scream. It folded laundry. It apologized. It checked locks at 3 in the afternoon. I tried to be kind without being obvious. I bought extra tea and left it on the counter. I made enough pasta for 2 and pretended I had cooked too much. I asked about her job, and she told me she worked part-time at a small flower shop near the train station. She liked arranging white lilies and yellow tulips, she said, because they made people believe in clean beginnings. That was the first real thing she told me. I held on to it. But the apartment building did not hold on to kindness so easily. Mrs. Calder from downstairs began whispering that Soraya looked familiar. A delivery man recognized her name and stared too long. One afternoon, I came home early and found a folded paper slipped under our door. It was a printed screenshot from an old neighborhood forum with Soraya's face circled in red. The words beneath it were cruel and loud. They called her a thief. A liar. A girl who destroyed families. Someone no one should trust. I stared at the paper while sunlight burned across the floor. My first feeling was shock. My second was suspicion, and I hated myself for it. Because once the world gives you an ugly story about someone, it becomes difficult not to look for proof. Suddenly her quietness seemed secretive. Her apologies seemed rehearsed. Her fear seemed like guilt. That evening, when she came home carrying a small bunch of bruised flowers the shop could not sell, she saw the paper in my hand and stopped breathing. She did not defend herself. That was what stayed with me. She did not snatch the paper away or demand to know where I got it. She simply looked at it, then at me, and her whole face collapsed into a tired understanding. She said she would pack. She said she had hoped this place might last longer. She said she was sorry for bringing trouble to my door. And then she turned toward her room with the calm of someone who had been rejected so many times that rejection had become a routine. Something in me could not let her go like that. Maybe it was the way she had said to on the first day. Maybe it was the coffee stain. Maybe it was the flowers in her hand, bent but still bright. I told her I was not asking her to leave. I told her I was asking for the truth. Soraya stood by the hallway wall, looking smaller than anyone should look in their own home, and for a long moment, the apartment filled with the noise of traffic outside, bakery customers laughing below, and the afternoon sun making everything look warmer than it felt. Then she told me. 2 years earlier, Soraya had lived with her older half-sister, Maribel, and Maribel's husband, Orson Pike. Orson was charming in public, generous at church events, always smiling in photographs, always offering help before anyone asked. But behind closed doors, he controlled everything. Money, phone calls, meals, visitors, even what Maribel wore. Soraya had moved in after their mother died, believing she could help her sister. Instead, she became another witness trapped inside that house. When Maribel tried to leave, Orson emptied their bank account and accused Soraya of stealing from him. He posted about her online, twisted every detail, and convinced neighbors she had robbed him and manipulated Maribel. By the time the truth came out in court months later, people had already chosen the easier story. The documents cleared her name, but gossip did not care about documents. She had moved 3 times since then. Each time, someone found the old posts. Each time, people changed. Landlords became cold. Roommates became suspicious. Friends became busy. Soraya learned to apologize before being accused, to pack before being asked, to expect hatred before kindness could embarrass her. I did not know what to say. There are moments when comfort feels too small for the wound in front of you. I wanted to tell her I believed her, but even belief sounded weak against 2 years of being doubted. So I did the only thing that felt real. I picked up the cruel paper, tore it in half, then tore it again and dropped the pieces into the trash. Soraya watched me like she had forgotten people could do simple brave things. The next day, I walked with her to the flower shop during my lunch break. It was a bright, clear day, the kind where shop windows sparkle and the city seems harmless. Soraya seemed embarrassed by my company, but I told her I wanted to buy flowers for the apartment. Inside the shop, she became someone else for a little while. Her hand stopped shaking when she touched the stems. She knew which flowers needed cooler water, which ones opened too quickly, which ones lasted longest near sunlight. The owner, an elderly man named Bram, treated her gently, and I understood then that some people had already seen the truth in her. But trouble does not vanish just because one person believes you. A week later, Mrs. Calder confronted Soraya in the lobby in front of 3 neighbors. She waved printed pages and demanded to know why a criminal was living in the building. Soraya stood frozen near the mailboxes, holding a paper bag of groceries, while oranges rolled across the floor. I had just entered the lobby and heard enough to feel heat rise in my chest. I picked up the oranges one by one, placed them back in Soraya's bag, and then asked Mrs. Calder if she had also printed the court dismissal, the police correction, and Orson Pike's restraining order record. The lobby went quiet. Mrs. Calder blinked as if truth had arrived without permission. I had found the public records the night before because I needed to understand everything. Not because I doubted Soraya, but because I knew the world listens better when kindness brings receipts. I showed the neighbors the documents on my phone. I did not shout. I did not insult anyone. I simply read the facts in a steady voice while Soraya stood beside me, trembling so hard I thought she might fall. One by one, the faces around us changed from judgment to discomfort. It was not a perfect victory. People do not like being wrong. But it was the first crack in the wall. After that day, Soraya changed slowly, like a room warming after curtains are opened. She began sitting in the living room in the afternoons, folding her legs under her while reading library books. She laughed once when I burned toast so badly the smoke alarm screamed. The sound surprised both of us. She bought a small basil plant for the kitchen windowsill and named it Captain Green, which was the first silly thing I ever heard her say. On Sundays, we ate breakfast at noon because the bakery downstairs sold day-old pastries cheap, and she claimed slightly stale cinnamon rolls had more character. But healing is not a straight road. Some days, she woke with that old fear in her eyes. Some afternoons, a phone call from an unknown number ruined her mood completely. Once, when a glass slipped from her hand and shattered, she backed against the wall and kept saying she was sorry until I gently placed a broom in her hand and told her accidents were allowed in this apartment. She stared at me for a long time after that. Later, she left a note on the fridge that said, "Thank you for making accidents allowed." I kept that note for months. The real test came on a bright Saturday morning when Maribel arrived. I knew who she was before Soraya said her name because they had the same eyes, except Maribel's carried a deeper exhaustion. She stood outside our apartment holding a folder and a little girl's backpack. Her daughter, Nia, was with her, hiding behind her leg. Maribel had finally left Orson for good, and she needed a safe place for a few hours while meeting a legal advocate nearby. Soraya went pale, not because she did not love her sister, but because the past had appeared at our door wearing a familiar face. I made tea. Soraya sat beside Maribel at the kitchen table while sunlight poured over them both. At first, they barely spoke. There was too much history between them, too much guilt, too many years stolen by a man who knew how to make victims blame each other. Then Nia reached for one of Soraya's bruised tulips from the flower shop and asked if sad flowers could become happy again. Soraya looked at the child, then at the tulip, and something inside her softened. She trimmed the stem, placed it in a glass of water, and said some flowers only look finished because no one gave them a clean cut and a little light. Maribel began crying then. Not loudly. Just quietly, with one hand over her mouth. She apologized to Soraya for not defending her sooner, for letting fear silence her, for watching the world turn against her sister while she was trying to survive. Soraya cried too, but her crying was different that day. It was not the silent crying of someone scrubbing a coffee stain in panic. It was grief leaving the body. It was love finding a door. Near the end of that afternoon, Maribel gave Soraya copies of everything: legal records, statements, proof of Orson's lies, proof that Soraya had tried to help. Soraya held the folder like it was heavier than the suitcase she had brought on her first day. For 2 years, she had been carrying shame that did not belong to her. Now, at least on paper, the truth had a shape. Over the next month, things began to change beyond our apartment. Bram put Soraya in charge of the flower shop's front window display. She created an arrangement called Second Spring, using flowers people usually ignored because they were bent, late blooming, or imperfect. The display became popular. People stopped outside to take pictures. Someone from the neighborhood association asked her to decorate a daytime charity event in the park. Mrs. Calder, still proud but quieter now, came by one afternoon and left an envelope with a stiff apology inside. It was not warm, but it was something. Sometimes justice arrives like thunder. Sometimes it arrives as an old woman admitting she should have asked before accusing. And me? I changed too. Before Soraya, I thought kindness was mostly about being nice. Holding doors. Sharing food. Saying the right thing. But kindness, real kindness, is heavier than that. It is choosing not to believe the worst when the worst is easier. It is standing beside someone when the room turns against them. It is letting a wounded person heal at their own pace without demanding they become cheerful to make you comfortable. Soraya taught me that people are not always quiet because they have nothing to say. Sometimes they are quiet because every truth they told was once used against them. One afternoon, almost 4 months after she moved in, I came home early and found the apartment full of flowers. Yellow tulips on the table, white lilies near the window, small purple blooms on the bookshelf, and Captain Green standing proudly in the kitchen like a tiny witness to survival. Soraya was in the living room, hanging a framed photo of the Second Spring display. She turned when I entered, and for the first time since I had known her, she did not look like someone preparing to apologize. She looked like someone who belonged. She told me she had been approved for a small grant to open her own flower studio with Bram's help. She would still live in the apartment for a while if that was okay, but she wanted to start building something with her name on it, something no one could stain with old lies. I told her the spare room was hers as long as she wanted it. She smiled then, fully and freely, and the room seemed to brighten around it. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Sometimes one small act of support helps a story reach someone who feels misunderstood, unwanted, or ready to give up on themselves. A few weeks later, Soraya invited me to the opening of her studio. It happened on a clear morning, with sunlight spilling across the sidewalk and people gathered around buckets of fresh flowers. Maribel came with Nia, who wore a yellow dress and handed out small cards that said, "Every flower deserves light." Bram cried proudly near the doorway. Even Mrs. Calder came, pretending she was only passing by, though she bought the largest bouquet in the shop. Soraya stood behind the counter, nervous but glowing, surrounded not by rumors, not by fear, not by the shadow of what people had said about her, but by proof that a life can bloom again when someone stops running long enough to be believed. Special request: comment "Every heart deserves a second chance" if you believe kindness can help someone heal. That evening, when we returned to the apartment, the hallway looked exactly as it had the day she arrived. Same walls, same sunlight through the stairwell window, same apartment door. But Soraya was not the same woman, and I was not the same man. She paused at the doorway and looked at the place where she had once stood with her yellow suitcase, expecting hatred before anyone had offered kindness. Then she turned to me and said she had been wrong that first day. I asked her what she meant, though I already knew. She said she thought I would probably hate her too, but instead, I had given her a home until she remembered how to give one to herself. And that is the truth I still carry with me. Sometimes the people who seem hardest to know are not hiding something dangerous. They are hiding something wounded. Sometimes the person who says you will probably hate them is really asking, with the last piece of hope they have left, whether you might prove them wrong. And sometimes, when you do not just save them from loneliness. You save a part of yourself too.